Welcome back, garden friends. So glad you could be here. Today, I have a special treat for you. We're gonna be talking all about growing from seed. Today, you can call me the Germinator. My name's Kevin Jordan, and I am a grower of plants. I love growing. I'm a gardener just like you probably. But growing from seeds is a fantastic thing to do. It's a little bit of, it's like kind of like giving yourself a hope and a prayer and a little bit of a promise to yourself that you're gonna have a fantastic growing season. And so with a little bit of effort up front, you can actually save a lot of time, a little bit of money, and you can actually open yourself up to a whole world of opportunity with new varieties. A few things you might need to get going. You're gonna need a good seed starting mix. And really what that's gonna be is that's a soil that's gonna be nice and light and fluffy. Compared to your potting mix, it's really not gonna have a lot of chunks in it that are gonna be large. It's gonna be finer grained. It's gonna be well draining. It'll hold a bit of moisture, but it also breathes really well. You'll notice there's different brands out there, but this EV Stone Organics is a fantastic seed starter mix. I wanna show you a little bit. We have an open bag right here. And so just to give you an idea, as I put my hand in there, it's really light, it's fluffy. I can put my hand right through it. Compared to, like I said, a potting mix, it's not gonna have large chunks of bark. Now, if you have a little extra potting mix at home and you wanna maybe try some seeds out in it, maybe with an old spaghetti strainer, you can sift out some of those larger chunks. But if that's not the case, I would highly suggest just getting a nice bag or two of fluffy seed starting mix. It just does the trick. For me, it just works out really well because it's gonna breathe a little bit. And what you want is you don't want a heavy soil. You want your seeds as they start to germinate, meaning when that sprout, that little embryonic root shoots out and the embryonic root shoots up, you want them to not have a lot of resistance. So with this kind of mix, they're gonna have very little resistance and they're gonna have just the right amount of air and water ratio that they're gonna need to flourish. But the one thing we're gonna do with this is we're actually gonna pour a little bit into a bucket or a container at home, because oftentimes I've noticed when I go to plant some seeds into a tray or a pot with really dry soil, in this case seed starting mix, if it's really dry, you'll notice that when you go to water it and put your seeds in, soil just flips over, it gets disturbed, and now that seed where you had it planted at a 1/4 inch or 1/2 inch or 1/8 of an inch depth, whatever it may be, it starts to flip up and then now it's not the right location where you want it. So what I like to do is actually pre-moisten my soil. So I got a little water here and I'll literally add some water to this. You don't want your soil to be turned into mud. So really just a little bit of water, get your hands in there, have some fun with it and actually stir it up a little bit, because mixing it up, getting it lightly moist, by the time you'll know it's nice and moist is because it won't just crumble away into dust. It'll actually maybe hold its shape just a little bit. You'll feel the moisture in there. Like I said, you don't need it super soggy, but you don't want it dusty and dry because it's gonna be difficult for when you plant. So some good seed starting mix. A good way to add water is gonna be a little watering can. Sometimes you can even use a spray, I've used a larger spray bottle, whereas sometimes you might use it for spraying your trees, your roses. I have one set aside just for watering because it gives us a nice amount of water that we can spray onto our soil gently. Because one of the things I've noticed in the past is you can plant your seeds perfect, but if you go out there and you shoot it with the garden hose, all your dirt flies everywhere. Now who knows where your seed went? I've done this. I've seen my students do this at the school, and so it's a little it's frustrating. So you don't want that. You want to water them gently. So you pre-moisten your soil. Once you have them in, you're going to water them gently. What we're going to utilize to plant them is actually a seed starting tray. Let me bring this out here. This is a pretty typical one. You can do it a lot of different ways. Everyone's got their different types of trays. Really, you just want something that's going to allow you to have a nice depth to your tray and some space for that seed to germinate. This one actually is great because it comes with a little greenhouse hood. What this does, and you notice it actually even has a hole cut into it, it's going to trap in some of that humidity, because one of the things you don't want to do when you're having your seeds start to sprout is you don't want to allow them to dry out completely. For a young seed, that's going to be death. You also don't want them to sit in water forever, right? So if that tray just fills up full of water and now your soil's just sitting in soggy water, that's also not great. What you want is your plants, your seedlings, to be moist evenly through. And so a good little tray like this is going to be helpful. It's got to have holes in it for drainage, and hopefully a tray to catch some of that if it's going to be indoors. If it's outdoors, you're going to want to protect them from the extremes of weather. Right now, a lot of folks are focused on their springtime garden. So for me, the first thing I ever start planting is my pepper seeds. A lot of folks are, they're really amped up about their tomato gardens, but for me, the tomatoes and peppers are similar, but I always like to start my pepper seeds about 3 to 4 weeks before my tomatoes, because for me here, I've noticed that the pepper seeds take a little longer to get growing. And so if I do it at the exact same time, by the time it's ready to plant, my pepper seeds might be maybe not as big and my tomato plants are overly big. And so what I do right now is actually at the school, all of our seeds are sprouted up. They're a couple inches tall, and they're all my pepper seeds. Pretty soon, maybe next week, I'm gonna start putting in all of our tomato seeds and everything else that we wanna grow for our springtime. So it's really important, I guess, for whatever region you live in, figure out what's the planting guide for your area. For us, if you come down to Green Acres, there's a wonderful planting guide for our region, and it'll tell you when you can plant things by seed, when you can direct seed things right into the garden, when it's best to transplant them into the garden. So for example, with peppers and tomatoes, you can start them right about now. It's late January, getting into February, so you can start them now, but we're not going to put them outside until the soil warms up, the days get a bit longer, and all the crazy weather's behind us, and that's usually going to be in April, give or take. And some folks love to get in a little early. Some people want to wait a little longer, but that's usually when it's good, and it has to do with the weather and the heat. So depending upon where you are at and what you're listening to, and where you're growing, if you're up in the mountains and it's cold, you might have to wait a little longer. So learn as much as you possibly can about whatever you're going to be growing and when it's the best time to grow it. And a seed planting calendar is the best way to go. Perhaps in this video and on this episode, we'll have that in the link. We'll have some links in the description where we can hopefully gear you and get you off in that direction so you can find some of that information, because it's super valuable, because there's no point and planting a seed off season if you're, by the time it germinates and grows, that we want to make sure it's at the right time. We have a plastic seed starting tray here, but a lot of folks, they're not into plastic. So they like the biodegradable stuff. There's ones that are made from fiber that actually, once they get going, they'll hold their shape for a while, and then once they're ready and your seedling's good at length and good height, time to get that sucker right in the ground, and guess what? These will just biodegrade right into the soil. It's fantastic. They're actually made from composted cow manure. So it's organic material. It breaks down, a fantastic option if you don't like the plastic. All of them work well. They're fantastic to use, whether you're using one that can biodegrade or you're using these reusable plastic ones. They're fantastic. Of course, you have these little miniature ones that pop up from discs. Just add water. Guess, look at that. It goes from that little one all the way to there. So there's many different ways you can plant a seed. In this case, if we're planting our warm season garden, you really want to consider, especially if you're doing it indoors at home, a heating mat. This is made just for seeds and growing. It's water resistant. It can get a little bit wet, and this is designed just to warm up at a proper temperature to kind of trick those seeds, because those seeds, they really don't want to grow when it's cold. So if you want to trick them into sprouting and germinating sooner, you've got to get that heat on them a little bit early, and that's where those heating pads are great. And now if you're indoors, and this is where the last mistake I want you to avoid is, don't get your seeds started and germinated indoors and think that a bright light window, is going to do it. Yeah, it's near a bright window. It's not going to be enough light. A lot of these plants are full sun, and even though it's too cold for them to go outside, we need to mimic some of that. We mimic the heat with the heating pad, and we need to maybe trick them into growing a little bit better with some artificial light. This is a little grow thing with a grow light. There's many different grow lights out there. Just do your research, find one that's going to be powerful enough for you, and find the right height away from your plants. So that way, as they grow, they're not getting burnt, but they have enough adequate energy of light so they can photosynthesize and put off new shoots and leaves, so that way they can grow healthy. So adding a little supplemental light can be very helpful. So you know what? Let's not waste any more time. Let's do it right now. I'm going to show you a little bit of close-up action on how we're actually going to plant these seeds. So now we're at one of my favorite parts, and that's actually planting. You can see right here I've got some of that little mix here, the seed starting mix. What's nice about having a seed starting mix is that the soil is going to be clean, and that's another thing to consider, is we don't want to introduce pathogens into our seeds. Having a tray that's reusable, it can be great, but just make sure that it's clean and disease-free. If you have to sanitize it from season to season, that's great. If it's brand new, then you're good to go. But you definitely want it extra clean. Now I'm just gonna actually sprinkle this in. I did pre-moisten it, like I said, so now it's not as dry as it once was. I can feel there's a little bit of weight to the soil now. Not overly soggy, but definitely has some moisture in there. And I'm just lightly kind of brushing it over these little gaps here, and to fill in this tray. You don't really want to push down really hard with the force of 1,000 winds, because that's really not going to help you. We're not planting a tree here. We're trying to get a seed going, and that seed is a little baby. It's very gentle. It doesn't have a lot of strength yet, and so we want to create the easiest path possible to having a wonderful life for that seed. And by lightly just kind of filling in these trays, that's going to be perfect for us. Now, when it comes to the seed, you're going to notice that they come in different sizes. So here, this is peas. I love growing fresh peas. They're so awesome. The blossoms are pretty. The pea pods are great. You can shell them, eat them all in there, and they're just fantastic. But look at the peas. They're pretty large in size. And I'm going to show you this in a second compared to some of the basil and the pepper seeds. And so the larger the seed, the deeper it needs to be planted. The smaller the seed, the closer to the surface it needs to be planted. So I would recommend you read the packet of whatever seed you're going to be planting. And actually, some of them have a ton of information on the back. And a lot of them will actually even have some information on the inside of that packet as well. So it's really important to read, learn as much as you can about whatever you're growing, because that'll be a great way to be successful. So with these peas, that size, it's about 1 inch in depth. So it's about usually about 2 to 3 times the size of that seed. Down is how deep you want to go. So really these ones are 1 inch down. Sometimes I'll make a little marker on a pencil, but with these I'll kind of just, I'll just eyeball it. For me, I like to kind of just make a gentle divot in there, about 1 inch down, and then I'll just drop them right in, one after another. If I have a larger container, sometimes you can put 2 seeds into one cell, but with these ones being so small, I'm probably just going to drop one in. With these peas, they germinate pretty well. Boop, inch down, because what it is, you want 1 inch of soil right above that pea, and that's what's really going to be perfect depth. Like I said, if it's too close to the surface, it's not going to get rooted in enough. If it goes too deep, you'll never see it emerge and break through the surface. So that's really good. Like I said, and then to cover them up, you can just gently just bring a little more soil over and just pile it right on top. And one thing, like I said, you want to consider is you want to label as you go. And sometimes folks will even label the row before they even plant. So they'll write peas, write the date, and get that row is done, right? And so our next row, I'm going to show you basil seeds, because they're quite a bit different in size. And I love growing basil. It's one of the best herbs to grow at home. It's awesome to grow. It grows like crazy when the weather's warm. And this is actually a seed. Look at those. It almost looks like dirt in my hand. Look at that. These seeds are so small, it looks like little grains of soil. So take a guess. Do these want to be planted really deep or a little more shallow? If you guess shallow, then you are right, my friend. Let's see here. I think these ones are here, 1/4 inch, 1/4 inch down. And so instead of piling dirt on, what you can do for 1/4 inch or 1/8 inch, you can actually just make a small divot if you want, or just put it right. You can, if you actually let these be a little bit shorter with soil, you can just sprinkle them on. With these basil, I'm probably going to sprinkle 2 to 3 seeds in each one. You don't want to do, sometimes I'll come back with my students, cells are empty, and then there's one cell with 45 seedlings in it. Don't do that. Spread them out evenly. Putting more seeds into one cell really isn't going to help you in the long run. You want to maximize your seeds. Just put 1 or 2, maybe 3 seeds in this case, because it's pretty small. But a tiny seed can grow into a massive plant. So just keep that in mind. You don't want to dump all your seeds into one little cell. And so I'm actually going to do 2 rows right here, just because I love basil. And what is nice about growing from seed is usually I plan to have extra for myself and extra for my friends. And so not only are you getting your hands on some really unique, wonderful varieties, but you're going to usually plant a little bit extra just in case. And that way, when you end up having extra, it's just more for you and more for your friends and family to share with. And so now I've got 2 rows of basil, right? And so I would label these up. Labeling is important. These ones are wood, which is nice. Other people might have better luck with plastic, where they can reuse them a little bit. But that's awesome. Now I want to show you pepper seeds, because right now peppers are where it's at. If you haven't started your peppers already, don't worry, it's not too late. We can still grow some peppers. But for me, I like to start them, like I mentioned, before I grow my tomatoes, because the tomatoes seem to germinate and grow and just take off so quickly, so they have no problem. Whereas the peppers, they're a little shyer. They like to grow and germinate. You can see their seeds right there. They're quite a bit bigger than the basil, but they're still not nearly as big as those peas. And so with these, it says 1/4 inch. There we go. So with the basil, I did like 1/4 inch, 1/8 inch. With these ones, I'm actually going to make a nice 1/4 inch little divot in there. And I'm going to drop them in one at a time. Oh, here we go. Almost did it in the wrong little lane there. Some folks, they really don't, what's nice is you can actually, if you don't want to make that divot, you can just drop them right on top of the soil. In this case, I'm doing about 2 seeds per cell with my peppers. We can thin them out later. But what you don't want to do is, like I said, dump a bunch in one and then have to, you'd be fighting to thin them out. It'd be impossible. Not much fun. So some folks, they don't want to have to worry about putting a bunch of heavy soil on top, so they actually go with a really cool material called vermiculite, which is like a mineral. It's actually like a rock, mined from the earth, and then it actually gets heated up in an autoclave, high pressure, high heat, and it expands like an accordion, and so it absorbs water and air really evenly. And so some folks will actually use that to either mix into some of their potting mix or their seed mix, but you can actually even just sprinkle it on top and use that as your top coat. If you don't want to, if you're worried about your seeds having to break through that soil, a little bit of vermiculite on top. Some people use that as a strategy. Like I said, there's really many different ways to do it. So to quickly recap what we did, we found some really good seed germination mix that's light and fluffy. We actually pre-moistened it because it comes a little dry. We found the seeds we wanted to grow. We planted them at the proper depth they need to be. Bigger seeds go deeper down, smaller seeds stay higher up. We labeled them with the plant name and the day that we planted them. So that's very helpful. And we got them into our clean seed tray here that's been sanitized or brand new, so it's clean. We don't want any disease. We got them lightly moist. We're gonna keep them that way. Even after they sprout, we're gonna make sure they stay lightly watered. We don't wanna be inundated with standing water, and we don't want them to dry out. So somewhere in between, make sure you're adding heat. Gotta add some heat, fake them out. They want that warmth. So the heat mat is very important. And then once they sprout, they really are gonna require some light. A bright window might not be enough, but adding an extra bit of oomph with a grow light can be very helpful. Just make sure that it's at the right height away from your plants, and you can practice with that, and they'll have some instructions, I'm sure. But that's really it. Seed starting is super easy. It's fun to do. It's economical. It's a great way to introduce some wonderful varieties into your garden. And it's kind of fun right now. It's it's cool season. We can start thinking ahead and kind of daydreaming about the days of being in the spring and summer garden, harvesting, eating, planting, all that good stuff.